3 days after I walked away, my husband returned to the same hotel and told the world that nothing had changed.
The first thing Seo Junho tried to sell was not the empire. It was the story of what had happened to him. 3 days after I walked out of our home, he called an emergency press meeting at the Grand Elysian Hotel, the same building where he had brought Ha Yoon to the Winter Council dinner and seated her 12 feet away from me. There was a kind of arrogance in choosing that room again. Men like Junho often returned to the place where they had lost control because they believed control could be restored by repetition. The same table, the same lighting, the same staff trained to move softly around his presence. If the setting remained unchanged, perhaps he could convince himself that nothing important had moved. He stood beneath a wall of gold-veined marble and told reporters that the Seo Group was undergoing a temporary governance review. Temporary. That was the word he chose. Not collapse, not transfer, not abandonment. Temporary. He wore a charcoal suit, a white shirt, and the expression he had used for 7 years whenever the world tried to place a consequence in front of him. Calm enough to make other people question whether they had misunderstood the danger. Our operational structure remains intact, he told the room. There has been no change to the leadership of the Seo Group. Technically, that was true. He was still chairman. His name was still on the office door. His photograph remained in the lobby beside the portrait of his father. His security detail still opened the car door when he arrived. The people who had spent years calling him boss still lowered their voices when he passed. But authority is not the same thing as power. Authority is what is written beneath your name. Power is what happens after you give an instruction. Junho still had the first. By then, he had already lost most of the second. I watched the press conference from Adiza Okonwo's office, seated beside Director Park and a financial auditor named Choi Min-sok, who had worked for the Foundational Trust longer than Junho had worked for his own father. Adiza stood near the window with one hand resting against the glass. She did not look at the television. She had known powerful men for too long to be impressed by the way they performed certainty for cameras. "He is buying time," Director Park said. "No," I replied. The three of them looked at me. "He is buying belief." Adiza turned from the window. There was approval in her expression, but no surprise. My father used to say that belief was the first currency of every empire. Buildings, contracts, land, and security agreements came later. First, people had to believe the man at the center could protect what they placed in his hands. Junho's problem was not merely that the council had stood for me. His problem was that 12 men had returned to their offices and begun asking themselves what else they had misunderstood about him. A man could survive losing money. He could survive losing a contract. He could even survive losing a wife if the world believed he had chosen to let her go. What he could not easily survive was uncertainty spreading through the people who had once obeyed him without examining why. By the end of the press conference, Junho had received 7 questions about the Foundational Trust. He answered none of them directly. By midnight, the clip of him saying, "There has been no change to the leadership," had been replayed across 3 financial networks. By morning, 2 regional partners had delayed signing renewals. Not cancelled. Delayed. That was how the falling began. Not with explosions. With pauses. People waited before returning calls. They requested documents they had previously signed without reading. They asked whether Junho still had the authority to guarantee agreements backed by the Foundational Trust. Every question was polite. Every question removed something from him. At 9 o'clock the following morning, Adiza placed 12 folders on the conference table. Each one carried the name of a council member. "These are the offshore structures," she said. Director Park adjusted his glasses. "You should not be seeing all of them at once." "I should have seen them 4 years ago," I said. The words came out quietly. That was the truth I was still learning how to hold. My father had not simply left me 44% of the Foundational Trust. He had left me the responsibility attached to it. For 3 years, I had postponed opening that inheritance because grief had made every document bearing his signature feel like another room in which I would discover he was still dead. So I stayed away from the accounts. I stayed away from the governance rights. I stayed away from the council ledgers and the protective trusts and the quiet financial structures my father had designed beneath the visible empire. I had believed that leaving them unopened made me less involved. It did not. It only meant other people used the systems while I remained unaware of how much of my father's mind was still working inside them. Adiza opened the first folder. Inside were transaction maps, layered holding companies, foreign currency reserves, private lending agreements, and emergency funds designed to protect the council's assets during political investigations, market shocks, and internal conflict. The structures were legal, complex, discreet, and familiar. Not because I had seen them before. Because I had spent 3 years unknowingly helping Junho maintain them. Every evening he had returned home with a problem he did not call a problem. A delayed payment in Singapore. A supplier threatening to expose a contract dispute. A currency transfer that could not be completed without triggering an investigation. He would sit in the study with a glass untouched beside him and ask me questions as if they were theoretical. What happens when a company cannot move funds through its usual channel? What would your father have done if a partner became unstable? What is the fastest way to protect an asset without appearing to move it? I had answered because I thought he valued my mind. I had never asked where the answers went. Adiza turned another page. My own handwriting appeared in the margin of a risk memorandum. I stared at it. I remembered the night. Junho had returned home after 2 o'clock in the morning. He had removed his watch and placed it on the kitchen counter while I made tea. He had told me one of the council's shipping partners was facing sanctions. I spent 2 hours explaining how to separate the operational assets from the vulnerable holding company without destroying the partnership. He listened. He asked precise questions. Then he kissed my forehead and told me I had saved him a week of work. The next morning, he left before I woke. The strategy in front of me was mine. Only my name was not on it. Director Park noticed where I was looking. "You advised on these?" I advised my husband. The room became still. Adiza closed the folder. How often? I looked at the 12 names spread across the table. More often than I understood. Director Park leaned back. He had served both our fathers. He was not easily surprised. But I watched him calculate the years differently. Junho's reputation for extraordinary strategic instinct had grown sharply after our marriage. The council praised the way he solved crises before they reached public view. They called him disciplined, unusually perceptive, more sophisticated than his father had been at the same age. They had never seen me sitting at the kitchen table at midnight, moving numbers across a notepad while Junho listened. They had never seen him bring me incomplete problems and leave with complete answers. They had believed the machinery belonged to the man standing at its center. So had I. Adiza rested both palms on the table. "Nadia, your father built the framework. But these recent protections were designed from the adjustments you gave Junho." "How many?" "Most of them. I did not speak. Anger would have been easier. Anger is hot, immediate. It gives the body something to do. What I felt was colder. 3 years of conversations rearranged themselves in my memory. Every time he had called me brilliant in private and silent in public. Every time he had asked for my perspective before a council meeting, and then introduced the solution as if it had arrived fully formed inside his own mind. Every time I had believed being needed was the same thing as being valued. There is a particular kind of betrayal that happens when someone does not merely take your love. They take your intelligence, place their name on it, and allow the world to call them extraordinary. Director Park opened another folder. "The council members do not know the extent of this." "They will," Adiza said. I looked at her. "Not yet." She studied me carefully. "What are you waiting for?" "For Junho to show us what he does when he believes the title still belongs to him." He showed us 2 days later. At 11:40 on Thursday morning, the Seo Group Legal Division received a preliminary acquisition proposal from Han Jae-won, head of the Moran Syndicate. The Moran Syndicate had spent 14 years competing with the Seo Group for shipping routes, private security contracts, and political access across East Asia. Junho's father had once described Han Jae-won as a man who bought what he could not build and burned what refused to be bought. Junho intended to sell him 31% of the Seo Group's operating shares. The shares were Junho's personal inheritance. On paper, he had the right to transfer them. In practice, every asset connected to those shares sat on land, agreements and credit structures controlled by the foundational trust. He could sell the walls. He could not promise that the ground would remain beneath them. Adiza read the proposal twice. "He cannot be serious. He is desperate," Director Park said. "Desperate men are often more serious than rational ones," I replied. The offer valued Junho's remaining shares far below their actual worth. Han Jae-won understood exactly what was happening. He did not want to invest in the Seo Group. He wanted to acquire a wounded chairman, isolate the council, and use Junho's name to claim access to the trust's contracts. Junho must have believed the sale would accomplish three things. It would give him enough cash to operate independently of the foundational trust. It would bring the Moran Syndicate's manpower behind him. And it would frighten the 12 council members into returning before their own interests became vulnerable. He still believed the council followed strength. He had not yet understood that they followed stability. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, my phone rang. It was the first time Junho had called from a number I did not recognize. I answered. Not because I wanted to hear his voice, because powerful men reveal the most when they believe they are calling from a position you have not discovered. Nadia. He sounded tired. Not weak. Junho did not know how to sound weak, but there was a roughness beneath the control. You changed your number, I said. You stopped answering mine. Yes, a pause. I need to speak with you. You are speaking. In person. No. His breathing shifted. For 3 years, I had understood every silence in our marriage. This one was new. He was learning how little access remained. The Moran proposal is not what it appears to be, he said. I looked across the table at Adiza. The documents were spread between us. What does it appear to be? A temporary liquidity arrangement. Then why does it transfer voting rights? Silence. Not long, but long enough. You have seen it. I own the foundation beneath the assets you are offering. I own the shares. You own paper connected to buildings you cannot guarantee, routes you cannot secure, and accounts you cannot access without foundational approval. His voice hardened. You are trying to humiliate me. No, Junho. Humiliation requires an audience. I am explaining your contract to you privately. He said nothing. I could picture him standing in his office near the window, one hand in his pocket, the city behind him, trying to recover the rhythm of conversations in which I softened whenever his voice became colder. That woman was gone. I can stabilize this, he said. You had 3 years to stabilize your marriage. This is not about our marriage. That is the first correct thing you have said. The words landed harder because I did not raise my voice. This is about the council, I continued. The employees, the accounts, the families attached to the contracts you are attempting to sell because you cannot tolerate losing control. I am protecting what my father built. My father built it too. You never cared about the company before last week. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was, not the lie. The belief beneath it. He genuinely believed my lack of public claim meant lack of care. He believed care only existed when it resembled possession. I cared enough to spend 3 years solving problems you carried into our home. You were my wife. Yes. Then do not speak as though I stole from you. You took my strategies into rooms where you never spoke my name. His silence changed again. This time, it was not calculation. It was recognition. You knew? I know now. Nadia, the transfer to Moran will be reviewed under Article 19 of the Foundational Agreement. You cannot block the sale of my personal shares. I can suspend every trust-backed right attached to them. You would destroy the Seo Group to punish me. No. I would separate the Seo Group from a chairman trying to sell it while pretending he is saving it. His voice dropped. Do you understand what Han Jae-won will do if I withdraw? Yes. You do not. I understand him better than you do. That is impossible. Ask your mistress. The line became completely silent. I opened my eyes. Adiza was watching me. Director Park had stopped turning pages. Junho spoke carefully. What does Ha-yoon have to do with Han Jae-won? I was hoping you would tell me. I have not spoken to her since you left. That surprised me. Not because I believed he loved Ha-yoon. I had never understood what existed between them. But because Junho did not abandon useful relationships without first securing what they knew. You brought her into a council dinner. She had information about a Moran shipping tender. And you seated her inside a restricted room. She was never supposed to remain for the full dinner. But she did. He did not answer. How did she obtain the information? She worked through an independent consultancy. Which one? Another silence. I almost smiled. Not because anything was funny. Because the most dangerous weakness in a man like Junho was not arrogance. It was the certainty that he had personally verified everything important. Junho, I said, you were trying to sell your shares to a rival using a relationship introduced by the woman you lied to me about. She did not introduce Han. No? No. Then who arranged the first meeting? He did not answer. I ended the call. 3 minutes later, Adiza received a message from one of the Foundational Trust's investigators. The consultancy Ha-Yun claimed to represent had been dissolved 18 months earlier. Her professional credentials were real but incomplete. Her name had appeared in corporate filings connected to 3 failed mergers. Each merger had benefited a company controlled indirectly by Han Jae-won. Mistress was the word everyone had used for her. Mistress was a simple word. It made the story emotional, familiar, and easy to understand. A wife, another woman, a husband who chose badly. But Ha-Yun had not entered Junho's world because she wanted his affection. She had entered because men who believed themselves immune to manipulation were often the easiest to manipulate. They mistook restraint for honesty. They mistook access to information for intelligence. And when a beautiful woman appeared to understand their burdens without demanding vulnerability, they rarely asked who had taught her exactly what to say. We began tracing her movements. Ha-Yun had attended 7 private events connected to the Seo Group in 2 years. At 3 of those events, a Moran representative had been present. She had submitted strategic information to Junho about shipping bids, labor negotiations, and council disputes. Most of it had been accurate. Not all. The inaccurate pieces had one thing in common. Each had pushed Junho toward decisions that weakened the Foundational Trust's relationships while increasing pressure to seek outside capital. She had not needed to destroy the empire, only to make Junho believe the empire required a new partner. Han Jae-won. At 6:30 that evening, Ha-Yun requested a meeting with me. Adiza advised against it. Director Park advised surveillance. I agreed to both. We met the following morning in a private room at the small restaurant where I had eaten after leaving Junho. I chose the location because it had belonged to my memories before it belonged to this conflict. I would not allow Ha-Yun to define the room. She arrived 7 minutes early. No midnight green dress this time. She wore a grey coat, simple earrings, and no visible designer label. She looked younger in daylight. Not innocent, just less constructed. She sat across from me and placed her phone face down on the table. "I did not know you were still living together," she said. "You told me that in your message. He said the marriage existed only for family reasons. Did he say we were divorced? He said the process was private. That is not an answer." Her jaw tightened. "No, he never showed me papers. Did you ask?" She looked away. For the first time, I saw something human beneath the control. Shame, perhaps, or irritation at herself. I believed him. So did I. Her eyes returned to mine. That answer unsettled her more than accusation would have. She had prepared for anger. Anger would have allowed her to become defensive. Calm forced her to remain inside the facts. "How long?" I asked. "There was no affair in the way you think." That sentence usually means there was an affair in a slightly different way. He kissed me once. The restaurant noise seemed to move farther away. I kept my hands flat beneath the table. "When? 6 months ago. Where?" "Busan." "After a supplier meeting." "Did you stop him?" "No." "Did you know he was married?" "Yes," she swallowed. "But I believed you were separated." There are moments when pain returns not because the information is new, but because the shape becomes specific. A hand moving near a wine glass. A woman seated against a wall. A husband calculating the cost of telling the truth. A kiss in Busan. I allowed the pain to move through me without giving it authority. "What did you want from him?" Ha-Yun's expression changed. There it was again. The question she had not expected. "Nothing. That is not true. I wanted him to trust me." "Why?" She remained silent. I leaned back. Han Jae-won's acquisition proposal arrived 2 days after the council withdrew support. The consultancy you claim to work for is inactive. 3 companies connected to you benefited Moran after failed mergers. You did not enter Junho's life because you loved him. The color left her face slowly. She reached for her water and did not drink. "You have been investigating me. You entered an empire built on my father's name. Investigation was inevitable. I did not know about your ownership. I believe you." That surprised her. "But you knew enough," I continued. "You knew Junho was under pressure. You knew the council's loyalty was weakening. You knew which decisions would push him toward Han. I gave him information." "You gave him selected information. He made his own decisions." "Yes. I would not absolve Junho by turning Ha-Yun into the single author of his betrayal. She had manipulated him. But manipulation worked because he permitted secrecy, believed himself superior to scrutiny, and chose to lie to his wife. He had opened the door. Ha-Yun had simply understood what could be carried through it. "What did Han promise you?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around the glass. "A board position. In the Seo group? In whatever replaced it. And Junho?" She looked at me for a long time. He was supposed to remain chairman for 1 year. Publicly. After that? She did not answer. He would be removed. Of course he would. Han Jae-won did not buy wounded kings to share kingdoms with them. He used their names until the transition became acceptable, then removed them before they remembered they had once believed themselves powerful. Does Junho know? No. Why are you telling me? Because Han changed the agreement. How? My position disappeared. There it was. Not remorse. Consequence. Ha-Yun had discovered she was also disposable. The Mistress had believed proximity to the betrayal made her a partner in the victory. Men like Han did not have partners. They had instruments with temporary names. "You came because he defrauded you," I said. "He will destroy me. You helped him attempt to take control of thousands of employees and council assets. I never wanted anyone hurt. You wanted a board seat in an empire you were helping destabilize." Her eyes hardened. "You think you are different because you inherited your power." No. The answer came easily. I am different because when I discovered what my power could do, I asked who would be harmed before I used it. She looked down. Outside the private room, dishes moved through the kitchen. A server laughed softly at something another employee said. The ordinary world continued. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "The truth. I have told you." "No. You have told me what became useful after Han betrayed you." She stared at me. "Where is the original Moran agreement?" "I do not have it." "Who does?" "Han's attorney." "Then you are not useful yet." She flinched. It was a cruel sentence. I knew that. It was also the language she understood. "What happens to me?" she asked. "That depends on whether you continue lying." She reached inside her bag slowly and removed a small key card. Junho gave me access to a private office in the Moran Tower. Why? He thought I was meeting Han's legal team on his behalf. You were? Yes. And also reporting to Han. Yes. The admission barely carried across the table. What is inside? Recorded calls, draft contracts, payment schedules. Why did you keep them? Because I knew neither man would protect me if the agreement failed. For the first time since she entered the room, I believed she had told me something complete. Not because her fear made her honest, because self-preservation had made her careful. I took the card. You will remain available to Adiza. Will you tell Junho? I will tell him what he needs to know when he needs to know it. He will think I planned everything. Did you? She met my gaze. Not everything. That was the most honest answer she gave me. When she left, Director Park entered through the rear hallway. He had listened from the adjoining room with Adiza and 2 investigators. Do you trust her? He asked. No. Will you use the card? Yes. Junho will not forgive her. I placed the key card beside my untouched tea. This is no longer about forgiveness. It was about sequence. Junho had attempted to sell his remaining shares to Han because he believed the council would panic and return. Han believed Junho's desperation had made him cheap enough to purchase. Ha-Yun believed she could stand between them and become indispensable. All 3 had mistaken access for control. My father had taught me that the person with the most power in a negotiation was often the one willing to let the wrong deal die. So I did nothing publicly. For 4 days, Junho continued negotiating with Moran. I allowed the council to believe I was reviewing the proposal. I allowed Han's attorneys to prepare transfer documents. I allowed Junho to schedule a final council meeting in which he intended to present the sale as a completed decision. And while they moved loudly, we moved beneath them. The key card opened a private records room on the 41st floor of Moran Tower. We did not break in. Adiza obtained a preservation order based on evidence that trust-backed assets had been included in a fraudulent transfer proposal. At 5:20 on Monday morning, court officers entered with forensic accountants. Inside were 12 months of recorded conversations. Junho's voice appeared in 7. Ha-Yun's appeared in 19. Han Jae-won's appeared in all but 3. The recordings established that Ha-Yun had been paid to influence Junho's strategic decisions. But they also established something else. Junho had resisted several attempts to compromise the foundational trust. He had refused to transfer employees without protection. He had rejected proposals that would expose council families to investigation. He had insisted the trust's original obligations remain intact even after he lost access to them. He had been reckless, dishonest, faithless. But he had not intended to destroy the empire. He had believed he could use Han long enough to reclaim it. That was Junho's deepest flaw. He always believed he could stand closer to danger than everyone else without becoming part of it. 3 hours before the council meeting, I listened to the final recording. Han's voice was calm. Once the transfer is complete, Seo remains chairman until the market accepts the restructuring. And after? Ha-Yun asked. After, he becomes unnecessary. What about Nadia Adiemi? A pause. Then Han laughed. If she resists, we isolate the trust. If she cooperates, we make her ceremonial. Ceremonial. The words stayed with me. That was what men like Han believed women with inherited authority should become. Visible enough to reassure tradition. Powerless enough not to interfere. I closed the recording. Adiza sat across from me. You do not have to attend tonight. Yes, I do. He may react unpredictably. Junho? Han! He will not be given time. Director Park entered with a long black box. Inside was the original council oath, a document signed 26 years earlier by our fathers and the first 7 members of the Foundational Council. The oath did not pledge loyalty to a person. It pledged loyalty to the stability of the Foundation and to the senior trust holder charged with protecting it. For 7 years, Junho had presided over the council because his father's line held the chairmanship. But the chairmanship and the senior trust authority had been divided after my father's death. Junho inherited the visible throne. I inherited the deciding vote beneath it. No one had expected those powers to come into conflict. Until now. The council has requested a formal resolution, Director Park said. What resolution? To recognize you as presiding authority over all trust-backed operations. I looked at the oath. And Junho? He retains his personal shares and the Seo family title. But without trust recognition, he cannot direct the Empire's shared operations. The title of boss. No empire beneath it, the exact future he had been trying to prevent. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Power did not erase grief. It simply prevented grief from making decisions in your place. At 8 o'clock that night, the 12 council members assembled in the underground chamber beneath the old Seo headquarters. The room had no windows. Only stone walls, a circular black table and 12 carved chairs positioned around the Seo family crest. My father's name was not visible anywhere, but his architecture held the ceiling. I arrived through the eastern entrance with Adiza and Director Park. Junho had not yet come. Ha-Yun was already there. She stood near the far wall between 2 trust security officers. She had agreed to provide testimony in exchange for protection during the investigation. Not immunity. Protection. There is a difference. Her face was pale, but composed. She looked at me once. I gave her nothing. The council members rose when I entered. All 12. The sound of chairs moving across stone filled the chamber. I had heard about that sound from Adiza after the first meeting. I had imagined it. But standing inside it was different. These were men who controlled ports, security divisions, political relationships, and private fortunes. Some had known me for 3 years only as Junho's quiet wife, a woman at the edge of dinners, a hand on his arm during toasts, a name added to invitations because protocol required it. Now they stood because the Foundation required it. I did not mistake that for love. I did not need to. Respect earned through structure was more reliable than affection offered during comfort. Director Park pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the chair Junho had occupied since his father's death. I did not sit. Not yet, I said. At 8:07, the western doors opened. Junho entered with 4 men. 2 were his long-serving guards. The other 2 belonged to Han Jae-won. That told me everything. Junho had expected a confrontation. He had brought borrowed strength into a room where he once needed none. He stopped when he saw Ha-Yun. The entire room watched the recognition move across his face. His expression did not break dramatically. Junho's face rarely gave the world that much. But his body became completely still. The same stillness I had seen when I placed my hand on the suitcase before he could touch it. "Why is she here?" he asked. No one answered immediately. His gaze moved to me. I stood across the table in a black dress with my father's ring on my right hand. Not my wedding ring. That remained in a locked drawer at Adiza's office. "Sit down, Junho," I said. His eyes sharpened. It was the first time I had given him an instruction in front of the council. The two Moran men shifted slightly. The council's security officers responded at once, closing the space near the doors. Junho noticed. He looked at the 12 council members. None of them lowered their eyes. He sat, not because I had commanded him, because he understood the room had already decided what would happen if he refused. Han Jae-won entered 1 minute later. He did not bring guards. That was deliberate. Han preferred to enter rooms as though danger itself had invited him. He was older than Junho by nearly 20 years, silver at the temples, dressed in a navy suit with no tie. He smiled when he saw me. Nadia Adiemi, Han Jae-won. I knew your father. My father knew many men he did not trust. His smile remained, but something behind it cooled. He sat in the empty chair beside Junho. This meeting was called to finalize the transfer, Junho said. No, Director Park replied. It was called to review attempted fraud against the Foundational Trust. Junho turned toward him. Han did not move. That was the moment I knew Han had already understood the agreement was lost. He was not there to complete the sale. He was there to learn how much evidence we possessed. Adiza placed the acquisition proposal on the table. Then the payment records. Then photographs of Ha-yoon entering Moran Tower on dates she had told Junho she was working for independent clients. Finally, she placed a small speaker in the center of the table. Han's recorded voice filled the chamber. Once the transfer is complete, Seo remains chairman until the market accepts the restructuring. Junho looked at Ha-yoon. She did not look away. And after? Her recorded voice asked. After, he becomes unnecessary. The recording ended. No one moved. Junho's face had become unreadable. But I knew him. I saw the violence of understanding move behind his eyes. Not violence toward anyone in the room. Violence toward the version of himself that had believed he was controlling the arrangement. He turned slowly to Han. You plan to remove me. Han folded his hands. You plan to use my capital and discard our agreement once your council returned. Let us not perform betrayal as though only one of us considered it. Junho looked at him with the cold focus that had once changed entire rooms. Han did not respond, because the room no longer belonged to Junho. He turned to Ha-yoon. How long? Her lips parted. Junho, how long were you working for him? Before I met you. A small sound came from one of the council members. Not surprise. Disgust. Junho leaned back. For 3 years, I had watched him calculate consequences before speaking. Now there were too many consequences. No answer could restore the man he had believed himself to be. Was any of it real? He asked. Ha-yoon's eyes filled. I did not know whether the tears were genuine. Perhaps she did not know either. You trusted me, she said. That was not my question. I cared about you. You used me. Yes. The word landed without defense. Then she added, and you used me too. Junho's jaw tightened. You wanted information. You wanted someone who told you the council was wrong and you were still the smartest man in every room. I gave you what you wanted because it made my work easy. Junho looked at her as if she had struck him. But the truth was sharper than insult because it explained him. Ha-yoon had not conquered him with affection. She had reflected his preferred image back to him. A misunderstood leader. A man surrounded by lesser minds. A husband whose wife could not possibly understand the weight he carried, even while that wife quietly solved the problems he brought home. Ha-yoon had given him admiration without accountability, and he had mistaken that for intimacy. If you had not lied to me, she continued, I might not have agreed to go as far as I did. Junho stood. His guards moved instinctively. So did the councils. Sit down, I said. He looked at me. This time, anger reached his face. Not loudly, a tightening around the eyes, a fracture in the control. You brought her here to humiliate me. I brought her because she is evidence. She is a fraud. Yes, and you knew, before you did. His expression changed. That was the wound beneath everything. Not that Ha-yoon had deceived him, that I had discovered it, that the quiet wife he had underestimated had seen the trap surrounding him and had not rushed to save him before he walked into the room. You allowed this meeting to continue, he said. I allowed you to show us whether you would sell the empire to avoid admitting you had lost authority. I was trying to preserve it. You were trying to preserve yourself at its center. He stared at me. The council watched. 3 years earlier, I would have softened the sentence after speaking it. I would have explained that I understood his pressure. I would have offered him a path back to dignity before he asked. I had mistaken that instinct for kindness. Sometimes it was fear. Fear that if I allowed a man to feel the full weight of what he had done, he would decide I was cruel for refusing to carry part of it. I did not carry it now. Director Park opened the original oath. "Seo Jun-ho," he said, "the council must determine whether your attempted transfer violated the foundational agreement." Jun-ho did not look at him. He continued looking at me. "You already decided." "The evidence decided," I said. "No, you did." "Yes." The word moved through the chamber. Simple. Complete. I had decided. Not because I was his wife. Not because I wanted revenge. Because the senior trust holder was required to protect the foundation from any chairman who placed personal control above collective stability. Jun-ho had become the exact risk the agreement had been written to contain. Director Park read the resolution. Jun-ho would retain his personal Seo Group shares. The transfer to Moran would be cancelled. His authority over trust-backed operations would be suspended. The council's accounts, security agreements, shipping routes and political relationships would move under temporary executive control held by the senior trust holder, me. The suspension would remain until a full governance review was completed. Jun-ho listened without interruption. When Director Park finished, the room remained silent. Then the oldest council member, Chairman Kwon, stood. He had served beside both our fathers. He turned toward me and lowered his head. Not deeply, not theatrically. An acknowledgement. The council recognizes Nadia Adiemi as presiding authority of the foundation. The next man stood. Then another. One by one, the 12 rose. They placed their right hands over the original agreement. Not kneeling, not surrendering their dignity, choosing where their loyalty would stand. The oath was spoken in Korean first, then in English, because my father had insisted 26 years earlier that every agreement shared between families should be understood in both languages. We stand with the foundation before the title, with stability before pride, and with the lawful holder entrusted to protect both. Their voices filled the stone chamber. Jun-ho remained seated. Han Jae-won watched me with a new expression. Not admiration. Recognition. The kind predators give each other when one discovers the other is not prey. Ha-yoon lowered her eyes. When the final voice became quiet, Director Park pulled the head chair farther from the table. This time, I sat. Jun-ho looked at me from the opposite side. The title of boss still belonged to him. But every man who had once organized himself around that title was standing behind me. His entire empire had chosen. Not the wife who had endured him. The woman who had been keeping the machinery alive while he accepted the credit for its movement. Han stood. "I assume my presence is no longer required." Adiza answered before I could. "Your presence will be required by investigators." His smile disappeared. "You should be careful, Miss Okonwo." "She is," I said. "That is why you are still speaking instead of being questioned in a room without your attorney." Han looked at me. "Your father was more diplomatic. My father trusted you less openly." He buttoned his jacket. "This will not end here." "No," I said. "It will end in court." He left through the western doors. The 2 Moran men followed. Ha-yoon remained. Jun-ho stood slowly. His guards waited. For the first time, they looked uncertain about whether they should move with him automatically or remain until the meeting ended. He noticed. Of course he noticed. The machinery had begun asking whose signal mattered. He looked at the men who had protected him for 7 years. Wait outside. They obeyed. But the hesitation had existed. And once a man sees hesitation in loyalty, he believed permanent. He can never return to the innocence of certainty. Jun-ho turned to Ha-yoon. "You will testify?" "Yes." "Against me? Against Han? You worked for him?" "Yes." "You entered my home. Never your home." His eyes moved toward me. Ha-yoon followed them. The correction mattered. She had entered his office, his hotel rooms, his private meetings. She had never entered the place where I had sat awake while he slept after lying to me. She had never needed to. By then, he had already carried the betrayal home himself. "Leave," Jun-ho said. Ha-yoon looked at me. I nodded to the security officers. They escorted her through the eastern corridor. The council members began gathering their documents, but I raised one hand. They stopped. "Give us the room." Adiza hesitated. I met her eyes. "I will be fine." One by one, they left. Director Park closed the final door. Jun-ho and I remained across the circular table. the same table where the council had withdrawn from him. He looked older than he had 1 week earlier, not in his face, in the way he stood. Power had carried part of his weight for so long that without it, the body beneath seemed suddenly visible. She was a fraud, he said. Yes, I did not know. No, you knew before tonight. Yes, how long? Long enough to stop the sale. He looked down at the agreement. I would not have sold if I knew. You tried to sell because you did not know. His gaze returned to mine. What is that supposed to mean? It means your judgment only works when no one is clever enough to deceive you. His face hardened. You think you are better than me? No. I stood. I think I asked different questions. What questions? Who benefits? Who is harmed? Why is this person telling me what I want to hear? What part of my pride is making this decision feel necessary? He looked away. You never asked those questions about her, I continued, because she made you feel understood without asking you to become honest. You think you understood me? I understood you enough to build the solutions you called your own. His eyes closed for half a second. There it was, the truth he could no longer avoid. The offshore structures, he said. My strategies. I never claimed you presented them to the council. As chairman. Without my name. You were my wife. We were building the same empire. Then why was only your name spoken when it succeeded? He had no answer. I walked around the table slowly. Not toward him. Toward the door. Nadia. I stopped. His voice had changed. The authority was gone from it. Not forever. Perhaps only in that room. But I heard the man beneath it. I chose wrong. Yes, I believed she. This is not only about Hayoon. She manipulated me, and you lied to me. I thought we were already distant. We were distant because I was disappearing inside your life. You never said that. I asked whether there was someone else. He looked down. You said no. I was afraid. The answer was so quiet I almost missed it. Junho had admitted many things in our marriage. Mistakes in timing. Misjudgments in contracts. The difficulty of managing men he did not respect. He had never admitted fear. What were you afraid of? I asked. That if I told you the truth, you would leave. The irony did not need explanation. You lied so I would stay, I said. And the lie is why I left. I know. No. You understand the sentence, knowing it will take longer. He stepped toward me. I did not retreat, but I did not allow him closer than the distance I chose. Is there anything left? He asked. Of what? Us. The question should have broken me. A week earlier, perhaps it would have. But grief had completed its work. There was sadness. There would always be sadness. 3 years could not be erased simply because I had discovered what stood beneath them. But love without safety becomes a place where the heart learns to hide from itself. I had lived there long enough. There is history, I said. His jaw tightened. That is not what I asked. It is what remains. He looked at me as though he were waiting for the mercy I had always supplied. I gave him truth instead. I loved you when I believed your silence protected something honorable. I loved you when I thought the problems you brought home meant you trusted my mind. I loved you when I had to become smaller to remain beside you. Because I told myself powerful men required more space. I removed my wedding ring from the chain inside my dress. I had carried it to the meeting for this reason. His eyes followed it. But you did not need more space, Junho. You needed me to disappear enough that everything I gave you looked as though it had come from you. That is not fair. No, it was not. I placed the ring on the table. The sound was small. Metal against stone. Nothing like the sound of 12 chairs moving. But Junho flinched. I will not contest the divorce, he said. That is the first useful decision you have made for me without being forced. Pain moved across his face. I saw it. I did not enjoy it. That mattered to me. I did not want to become the kind of person who needed his suffering to prove my power. But I would no longer prevent his suffering by denying my own. What happens to the Seo group? He asked. The governance review begins tomorrow. And me? You will cooperate. And if I do, you may retain whatever authority the council believes you can exercise without threatening the foundation. You are offering me a position in my own empire. I am offering you the consequences of trying to sell an empire that was never entirely yours. He looked at the ring. You have become cold. No. I opened the door. I became clear. The investigation into Han Jae-won lasted 5 months. Ha-Yoon testified before 3 regulatory bodies and provided access to accounts that connected Moran to bribery, market manipulation, and attempted corporate theft. She was not treated as innocent. She paid back the money she had received. Her professional licenses were suspended. The board position she had been promised disappeared before it ever existed. She left Seoul after the final hearing. I saw her once before she went. She came to Adiza's office to sign the last statement. She looked tired, not defeated. Consequences do not always destroy people. Sometimes they remove the illusion that they were winning. "I am sorry," she said. I looked at her. "For helping, Han? For sitting 12 feet away from you and knowing enough to understand what I was doing?" It was the first apology she offered that did not contain an explanation. "I accept that you said it," I replied. "Not forgiveness, not punishment, recognition." She nodded. At the door, she stopped. "Did he ever love me?" "No." She turned. The certainty surprised her. "He loved what you allowed him to believe about himself," I said. "That is not the same thing." "And you?" I thought of Junho asking for my advice at midnight. The meals we had shared in silence. The way he had once stood in the rain outside my father's funeral because he understood I could not bear another person touching me. Love had existed. That was what made the betrayal painful. People often wanted betrayal stories to reveal that nothing had been real. Sometimes the more difficult truth is that something real existed and was still not protected. He loved me as much as he knew how, I said. It was not enough. 6 months after I left, the governance review ended. Junho retained 18% direct authority over the Seo Group's independent divisions. The remaining operations were reorganized beneath the Adiemi Seo Foundation. My father's name appeared publicly for the first time beside the empire he had helped create. So did mine. The 12 council members voted unanimously to appoint me executive chair of the foundation. The newspapers called me many things. The hidden heiress. The 44% wife. The woman who took a Mafia empire without firing a shot. One headline called me the Black Empress of Seoul. I disliked the word at first. Empress sounded ornamental. A woman seated above a structure other people maintained. But the employees began using it differently. Not publicly. Not in documents. In corridors. In messages sent after difficult negotiations. The Empress approved the protection fund. The Empress stopped the layoffs. The Empress made the council explain the contract before signing it. To them, the title did not mean someone above the work. It meant the person finally willing to admit who had been doing it. I moved the foundation's headquarters out of the old Seo building. Not because I wanted to erase Junho's family. Because the next era required a room that did not teach everyone to look automatically toward one man. The new council chamber was built with 13 seats. 12 for the members. 1 for the senior trust holder. All equal in height. No throne at the head. Power did not need furniture to explain itself. Director Park remained chief advisor. Adiza became general counsel of the reorganized foundation. The first policy we passed required attribution for strategic work presented to the council. No advisor, spouse, assistant, or junior employee could have their contribution absorbed into a senior man's reputation without written recognition. Some members called the rule unnecessary. I asked them why honesty felt unnecessary only after someone demanded it. The objections ended. Junho attended the first quarterly meeting under the new structure. He arrived without an entourage. 1 guard waited outside. Not because Junho had become harmless, because he had begun understanding that men who constantly display protection often reveal how uncertain they are without it. He wore black. He always would. But his father's gold watch was gone. I noticed immediately. He sat 3 seats away from me and spoke only when invited. His report was accurate. Clear. He credited the analysts who prepared it. At the end of the meeting, he remained while the others left. I closed my folder. "You have improved." A faint expression moved across his face. "Your praise sounds like an evaluation." "It is," he nodded. I sold the watch. I had not asked. Why? It belonged to my father. I know. I wore it because I thought looking like him would make decisions feel certain. "What did you do with the money?" "Created a fund for employees affected by the restructuring." That surprised me, he noticed. I am capable of learning. Capability and willingness are different things. I am trying to develop both. I believed him. That did not mean I trusted him. And trust was not a prize granted, because someone finally began repairing the damage they had caused. He looked around the new chamber. No seat at the head. No. You never wanted the throne. I wanted the decisions to survive the person making them. He nodded slowly. My father would have respected this room. So would mine. There was silence between us. Not the old silence. The old silence had been crowded with everything I was afraid to ask. This silence had boundaries. I heard what they call you, he said. The Empress? Yes. I did not choose it. It suits you. I looked at him. Once, a compliment from Junho could carry me for days. Now I received it without needing it to become proof of anything. Do you regret her? I asked. Ha-Yun? Yes. I regret what I did to you. That was not the question. He understood. I regret that I was easy for her to deceive. Honest, still incomplete. And do you regret her? He thought before answering. I regret that I used another person's attention to avoid facing what had happened to our marriage. I regret that I treated her dishonesty as the entire betrayal when mine began first. That was better. Painfully better. Thank you, I said. For what? For finally naming your part without placing it inside hers. He looked at me for a long moment. Will you ever forgive me? I already stopped carrying anger. Hope appeared too quickly in his eyes. I continued before it could become entitlement. That is not the same thing as returning. The hope settled. He nodded. I know. This time, I believed he did. He left the chamber alone. I watched through the glass as he crossed the new lobby. People still noticed him. Some moved aside. But the room did not reorganize itself around his presence anymore. He was no longer the heaviest thing inside it. That evening, I returned to the apartment I had purchased near the river. Not the home I had shared with Junho. A place with wide windows, pale walls, and no guards in the corridor. My father's photograph sat near the kitchen. Beside, it was the original copy of the foundational agreement. For years, I believed inheritance meant receiving what someone had owned. I understand it differently now. Inheritance is also receiving what they understood. My father understood that power should be built beneath ego, where one person's failure could not destroy everyone standing nearby. Junho inherited a title. I inherited the reason the title had limits. The Empire did not choose me because I was his wife. It chose me because when he tried to sell its future to protect his pride, I was the person who refused to let the wrong deal survive. It chose me because the offshore accounts carrying the council's wealth had been strengthened by strategies I created in a kitchen when no one knew I was working. It chose me because the men who once believed Junho was the machinery finally saw the woman who had been keeping it moving. And Ha-Yun? She had been a fraud, but she had not created the weakness that destroyed him. She only found it. The true collapse began long before she entered the Winter Council dinner. It began every time Junho accepted my brilliance in private and erased it in public. Every time he mistook my silence for agreement. Every time he believed love meant I would remain no matter what truth he withheld. His empire chose me because I had never asked it to. I had only asked it to remember what stood beneath it. My father's name, my work, my judgment. My refusal to keep holding together a man who had chosen deception over the woman quietly protecting everything he claimed to own. People still ask me when Junho realized his mistress was a fraud. They think it happened when the recording played in the council chamber. It did not. He realized it when he looked around that table and saw 12 men standing behind me. Because in that moment, he understood the difference between the woman who had made him feel powerful and the woman whose power had made his entire empire possible. One had reflected the man he wanted to believe he was. The other had built the ground beneath him. And when the ground finally chose its rightful owner, the boss kept his title, but the empire crowned its empress. If you believe a woman should never have to disappear so a man can look powerful,